Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Backchannel. It's just after 9 o'clock, or it is 9 o'clock here on the West Coast. I'm in California. I'm Anthony Davis. This is the Anthony Davis Show. And today is Tuesday. It's a brand new day. It's a brand new year. And we are celebrating the new year with lots of chat. So if you want to join in, then wake up your device, say, and then your message, and be part of the show. You can also chat via backchannel.tv. It's a kind of chat facility on a web browser, on your phone, or wherever you want to put it. And finally, we're streaming on YouTube as well. So if you want to join in there, then it would be great to see you. I'm Anthony Davis. We've got lots to talk about this morning here on Backchannel, which is the only place you can listen to, watch and chat with hosts of live shows right here on your device. It's a little chilly here in California. It's 46 degrees right now, hence why I'm wrapped up. You know, so I was just feeling a little chilly and I needed to, it'll warm up as I talk, nonsense. And the heat of my nonsense will kind of, present itself. Let's have a little look at what we're going to do today. We've got lots to talk about. Lots happening. We're going to look at Elizabeth Holmes, the case that she was found guilty by a court in California of fraud. We'll look at that story. That's like a blood testing clinic that she created. The Senate may vote to change filibuster rules. We'll ask what that means. What exactly is a filibuster? I thought it was like a Victorian musical instrument. BlackBerry has officially discontinued its service on its classic smartphones, marking an end to one of the most iconic mobile devices ever made. We'll take a look at the classic handset and ask why it made such an impact, yet ultimately fell out of favor. And also, this day in American history, Ralph Bunche was the first African-American official to be appointed to the U.S. State Department in 1944. We'll take a look at his story and find out all about him and, learn a little bit about somebody you possibly never heard of. So let's dive straight into the morning papers, because that's what we're going to do. First, we'll just review the papers, zigzag across the US, and see what's happening. The Decatur Daily is where we're going to start. It's the independent voice of the Tennessee Valley since 1912. No masks required at school is the headline. It says, despite a surge in the number of COVID-19 cases that has prompted some schools in the state to go online or mandate masks, area school districts have no plans to require masks when students return after the holiday break. Classes begin today at Decatur City, Morgan County, and Lawrence County schools, while students return to Limestone County, Hartselle City, and Athens City on Wednesday. They say in Morgan County, 32% of all people tested in the last week have had the coronavirus, and the county is averaging about 110 new cases per day. The statewide positivity rate over the last week is 36%. I mean, look, this is the thing, isn't it, about this whole, mask mandate in schools. It's like, take the politics out of it, ask a simple question: is there a pandemic? Yes. Are young kids vaccinated? No, children under 5. And a lot, actually, there's only about 25% of children over 5 that are vaccinated, between 5 and 11. And is it putting children in hospital? Yes. How do you fix it? You wear masks. I mean, this is very simple. And yet, this obsession in some of these southern states with not doing what the federal government say, this obsession with it. And when you were to talk to individuals about this and say, but, the masks work, don't they? They'll be like, well, that's not the point. The point is we don't want to be told how to live our lives. So there's this kind of chasm in between public health advice and political freedom and liberty. And why, if this country is so divided, why can't there be some crossover, even if it comes to protecting the lives of children? Because the argument that it's preventing kids from learning is garbage. The argument that it's stopping children from lip-reading each other is garbage. There is no argument for children not wearing masks. And I speak as a parent. Do you know what I mean? Like, I have a vested interest in this subject. Anyway, no masks required at schools. That's what's happening in Tennessee. Yeah, my children love their masks. They actually love their masks. They wear them around their necks when they're not wearing them. They lift them up over their face. I have a 3-year-old. He loves his mask. You know, he has various different masks. He's like, can I wear the bunny mask today? Can I, he's got different names for them. Like, it's normal. It's personal protective equipment. It works. The system works. Also on the front of this Tennessee newspaper, Babbitt had history of erratic acts, is the headline. The woman fatally shot by police threatened her future husband's then girlfriend. Now, this is the woman that has been, lauded by Donald Trump as a martyr in the insurrection. You may remember, she was wrapped in a Donald Trump. Well, I think it was a Confederate flag she might have been wrapped in. I'll have to check. She was wrapped in either in a MAGA flag or a Confederate flag, and she was trying to climb through a broken window of a door that was closed in a corridor, and there was a Capitol Police officer pointing a gun at her. She could see the gun, and she continued, and he was like, don't move, don't move, don't move, and she continued to push forward. So he shot, and it caught her in the shoulder or the neck or that area, and it killed her. And she's been hailed as a martyr, even though she broke in and entered a restricted place. Trump's kind of ignoring that bit, and so is all of her supporters. And so she's been hailed this martyr. Well, it turns out, and because she was a former Air Force vet, she, has been heralded as this perfect person. But now all this stuff is coming out. This story says the first time Celeste Norris laid eyes on Ashley Babbitt, the future insurrectionist had just rammed her vehicle 3 times with an SUV and was pounding on the window, challenging her to a fight. Norris said the bad blood between them began in 2015 when Babbitt engaged in a months-long extramarital affair with Norris's longtime live-in boyfriend. When she learned of the relationship, Norris called Babbitt's husband and told him she was cheating. This is, I don't really like to talk about other people's business. It makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable. The reality is that she'd still be alive today if she hadn't fallen for all of this propaganda about the election being stolen, which was, of course, not true. And she was so fired up, so angry, so whipped up by Trump and his people that she kind of stormed the Capitol and ended up losing her life. None of it should have happened. None of it. And what she does in her private life is her business. But when she enters public ground, like the Capitol building, breaks in, gets past a police line, and, that's when we get into this kind of criminal area. I've never been one for people's personal lives. I'm not really into those types of stories. I think what you do is your business, especially among consenting adults. More snow possible is the headline. It says after 2 storm systems brought high winds, heavy rains, and up to 5 inches of snow to the area during the weekend, the National Weather Service in Huntsville said residents could get additional snow, although not as much as Thursday. Today, the National Weather Service and Limestone County Emergency Management Agency officials will be assessing parts of northern Limestone County to determine if damage sustained in Saturday's storm was from a tornado. And finally, on the front of the Tennessee newspaper, the new space telescope, they're saying it's hunky-dory after fixes. Yes, this is a story out of Cape Canaveral. It says NASA's new space telescope is on the verge of completing the riskiest part of its mission, unfolding and tightening a huge sunshade after ground controllers fixed a pair of problems, officials said on Monday. The tennis court-sized sunshield on the James Webb Telescope is now fully open, the process of being stretched tight. The operation should be complete by Wednesday. There you go. You see? It's all we need, another telescope. Morning, Stacey. Morning, Michael. Thank you for joining us. Stacey's having a lunch in Texas. She's having pizza with chips and cookies. We might have to do something about your diet, Stacey, because every day you're announcing this food, and it does sound like we need to get some salads in there. Some vegetables, some roasted veg, some vitamins. I'm just looking out for you, that's all. Okay, let's go to another newspaper in Alabama. This one is called it's a very interesting name. This is the Dothan Eagle. Headline, Omicron pushes positivity rate. Alabama is now back in a red area with high overall transmission. I mean, you know what the people on the right of the politics are saying about all this, don't you? This Omicron. The fact that everyone's getting it and the fact that people are kind of getting ill for a few days and recovering. They're all just calling it a cold. They're saying, did you catch the cold yet? They're just referring to it as a cold. They don't care for the fact that it is a dangerous virus that is causing a blockage in hospital beds. Because that's the whole reason for this whole, vaccination program and mask-wearing program, social distancing program. It's all to protect hospitals so that the most sick, the most vulnerable, can be cared for in hospital because there aren't enough beds for everyone. It's a little bit like gymnasiums, There's not enough running machines for everyone. They work on the assumption that you're not going to come to the gym. It says, after reaching low positivity rates in testing and a marked drop in hospitalizations before the holidays, Alabama is back fully in the red with a high overall transmission risk and a new high for the number of COVID positive test results. Alabama's testing positivity rate reached 36.4% on Monday, with 1,102 people hospitalized around the state. The positivity rate is determined by the number of positive nucleic acid amplification tests out of the total number of nucleic acid tests administered over the past 7 days. Don't quite know why they had to say that. I don't think that was really necessary for this article. It says, during the surge in cases caused by the Delta variant, the state's moving 7-day positivity rate reached 23% in August. The rate dropped to 4.9% by November 1st, and just a few days before Christmas, the positivity rate was just 8.4%. But now, of course, it's up to 34.9, 29, 21, 14, all various counties around Alabama. So clearly, Omicron is a very different strain of coronavirus to Delta. Delta is like few and heavy, and Omicron is everywhere and milder, but only for people who are vaccinated. DCS COVID protocols important. Guidelines remain as area classes resume. This is saying Dothan City Schools. The officials are reminding families and students the importance of following COVID-19 safety protocols that are established to minimize health risks for students, staff, and families when schools resume on Tuesday. That's today, isn't it? I mean, some schools go back today. My daughter's schools push back to Tuesday next week. They reviewed and considered the new recommendations by the CDC and consulted with other districts in the area. They said, while we recognize these measures can be challenging to follow, we are all working together to support one another. We must do our part to be extra vigilant while the COVID-19 virus and its variants remain a factor in our lives. So there we go. Let's see what's next on the list. We're going to go to the Arizona Republic now. Stacey says she doesn't like salads. Have you ever had like a really yummy salad? Like someone makes you like you can't make them at home. You have to go somewhere, have them delivered. Like a really yummy salad, like a chopped salad. Do you know what I mean? Like with egg and beans and tuna and lovely big tomatoes, like a real good meaty chopped salad with seeds and there must be a lot you can put in a salad that you would never expect to find in there. When I was growing up, my mum's idea of salad, this is very English salad, is basically iceberg lettuce, not really chopped up much, cucumber and tomato and maybe celery. And not really chopped up properly, just in lumps. And some salad cream, Heinz salad cream. I never got a sliced boiled egg, Carla. I wasn't as fancy as you growing up, clearly. But that was it. And no wonder people grow up in England thinking that salad is not a nice thing to enjoy because, We never really did salads very well in England. We just didn't. Whereas when I first came to California, even just to visit, and I would order salads, they were so unctuous. They were so delightful. I was like, wow, this is a salad? I remember coming back from California to London one time after a trip, and I went into Whole Foods in London, which I would never normally do, way out of my stratosphere. But I'd been to Whole Foods here, where a salad was, affordable. It was like $14. The equivalent salad from Whole Foods in London was about £27. I wanted the same things that they'd put on the salad in LA, in London, and it came to about £27. I wanted a bit of salmon fillet and beetroot and all of these really interesting things. I really like those, like quinoa and various, interesting grains. Anyway, Arizona Republic leads with Omicron rapidly on the rise in state. Cases involving variant have increased sharply. Yes, Grace Quirk picked up 7 vials of saline diluted saliva from her lab manager at the University of Arizona on December 20th. She was alone except for some tubes of people's spit, a pipette, a computer, and an Oxford nanopore genetic sequencing machine. Where is this going? Several hours later, still in the empty lab at 3:30 in the morning, she had the answer she was looking for. One of the coronavirus samples she had sequenced was the new variant, Omicron. It was the first Omicron case on her campus, and she had been the one to run the test. She said, "You're just in this room, and you've been in the room all day, and then something happens, and you're the only person in the world that knows something," said Quirk, a third-year PhD student studying viral genetics at the University of Arizona. She emailed her advisor, professor and head of ecology and evolutionary biology, Michael Warraby, to send him the data. Then she was back in the lab by 7 a.m. You see, these are the people behind these discoveries, doing the work for us. It's very interesting to me that, we carry on, don't we? But we don't realize that all of this data is being crunched by people like this PhD student, Grace Quirk. Water reduction hits central Arizona growers. This is a story about the Colorado River shortage, which leads to shrinking farms. Yes, more than 2 decades of dry winters and drying Colorado reservoirs will finally produce a long-feared landscape of drier farms in central Arizona starting this month. Desert farmers, especially the 900 or more in Pinal County, start the new year with massively reduced allocations from the canal that delivers water hundreds of miles from the river. Their irrigation districts are using state money to drill new wells to replace some of the losses with groundwater, another resource that's at a premium in the fast-growing region. But it won't be enough to offset the reductions, and so the growers who produce the region's cotton, alfalfa, and other crops are parting back their plantings across thousands of acres. So there we go. Oh yes, alfalfa is very big in Arizona. They probably export it all because nobody wants it, but it all comes to California and they put it into salads here and sandwiches. Alfalfa is like the kind of, the hipster snack. I don't get it, but it's a thing. FDA expands Pfizer boosters for more teens. It says the US is expanding COVID-19 boosters as it confronts the Omicron surge, with the Food and Drug Administration allowing extra Pfizer shots for children as young as 12. Boosters already are recommended for everyone 16 and older, and federal regulators on Monday decided they're also warranted for 12 to 15-year-olds once enough time has passed since their last dose. Interesting. That's very interesting, isn't it? That they're going to start, boosting 16 plus. I wonder if they'll start boosting the little kids. My daughter just got her second Pfizer. Isn't it interesting how Pfizer is so far ahead of Moderna with the children's vaccines now? What's happening in England, Carla, with AstraZeneca? Is that still considered an acceptable vaccine? Because, it's not been authorized here in America. AstraZeneca is, of course, the Oxford University vaccine. That was one of the first vaccines to be announced. But is it an mRNA vaccine? I don't think it is it? But it's not an mRNA vaccine. It's not the same technology as Pfizer and Moderna. I think it's a different technology. I just wondered how it was able to respond to Omicron. Whether or not AstraZeneca is doing anything for Omicron. Also, Arizona sets national gambling records for sports betting. It says sports books took in $777 million in bets, winning nearly $70 million from gamblers in their first 2 months of operation, which set new monthly records for legal U.S. sports betting, according to state data released over the holiday weekend. Interesting. Stacey says, I would have chopped salad, but the texture of certain salads I really hate. You should try the boiled vegetables. Boiled vegetables? I'm okay. I like to roast vegetables. The good thing about roasting vegetables, you don't even need to cut them up. Just stick them in the oven, leave them for a couple of hours, till the fire service come. Oh, 3 doses of AstraZeneca. But does it say if AstraZeneca is using mRNA technology or not? Oh, it is. No, Pfizer's an mRNA as well. They're the only. I think they're the only two. No, PFE.N is the name of its. It sounds like you're reading from a Reuters document because that's just its trading name. Is it Reuters? I'm such a sleuth. That's good. Yeah, AstraZeneca hasn't been authorized in the US. And in fact, some of my family that had AstraZeneca, they were worried about traveling to the US because there was the fear that they were going to not be accepted. Their vaccine would not be accepted here because it's not authorized here, but it is now being accepted. So you're okay. You're okay. Okay, let's jump onto the Enterprise record now from California. Oh, no, is it? Yes. Serving Chico in the North State since 1853. There you go. Animal shelters see increase in pets. Oh, this is interesting. In Butte County, an increase in animals over the past couple of months. I was talking to a friend yesterday who has a dog, and the dog was throwing up while we were FaceTiming. And I said to him, now that you've got a girlfriend, do you really have much use for a dog? And he said, do you know something? That's a very good point. I mean, he loves his dog and everything, but, he didn't have a girlfriend for so long, and now he's got a girlfriend, and it's like, well, surely the dog was just to keep him company. I don't know. I mean, I've never had a dog, so I don't quite understand what it's all about. But I did say that, is the dog and the girlfriend interchangeable in terms of, company? And he was kind of, yeah. Do I need a dog now? We were only joking, obviously. He's not going to get rid of the dog. I said he should get rid of the dog. So animal shelters see increase in pets. Maybe it's because more people have found partners. Maybe that's what it is. Chico teen hopes her music heals. This is a young musician. And Chicoan, Chloe Brandy, hopes that her music will help heal and inspire other people. She was involved in a physically abusive relationship with a male friend of hers who she grew up with and was involved in musical theatre. As children, their relationship was fine, but as they grew up and entered high school, she said her friend started to change and even began to attack her, putting her in a headlock while she screamed at him to stop. She tried to laugh it off, but was really scared. She was able to see herself out of what she felt was a toxic relationship, but it was left with a lot of anger and sadness, which she was able to channel through her music. So that's the arts and entertainment section of the Enterprise record. High winds projected in latest storm. The PG&E preparing for outages. Yes, this always happens, doesn't it? With these overhead power cables, the electricity companies, they just can't maintain their infrastructure. It's always the way. Okay, next is the LA Times. LAUSD orders virus tests for all before return. Yes, this is true. It's a very weird photograph they've put on the front of the newspaper. It's health officials have been told school districts to brace for the worst coronavirus surge yet. And this photo they've put on the front of the LA Times has got a photograph of parents waiting at the school gates, and on the steps a child looks like it's died of coronavirus. It's just lying there. And obviously he's just messing around, but it really does look like, when you pair it with an article about the coronavirus and the surge in Omicron, to put a picture of a child passed out on the steps of the school is really are they just joking with this? Is there a sense of humor attached to this? It's such an inappropriate photograph. It says the LA School District has ordered coronavirus tests for all students and staff before they return from winter break next week, as a new period of high anxiety takes hold among parents and educators amid the explosive surge of the Omicron variant. Many parents expressed fears over the rapidly spreading contagion. Others are terrified about possible campus closures that could derail a return to normalcy needed for the mental health and academic recovery of their children. So, excuse me, that's obviously a big thing here in LA and will affect my kids as well. And the problem is, there's no home tests available because they're all completely sold out. So, how people are going to go about this, I don't know. I guess parents are going to have to take them to clinics, and try and get them done properly. Allies still fear for US democracy. Trump's exit elicits relief, but worries persist about threat. This is a story that says last January the 6th, the world watched in shock as a pro-Trump mob stormed the US Capitol seeking to disrupt the certification of Joe Biden's election victory. Well, 1 year on, many Americans' closest allies are still profoundly concerned about the state of US democracy. In Western Europe, major powers were openly relieved by President Trump's exit from the Oval Office. Even so, there is a sense among them that the long-term threat to US democracy, democratic institutions, remains. Perhaps nowhere is that feeling more acute than in Germany, rebuilt from the ashes of World War II, thanks in no small measure to the helping hand extended by its former adversary, the United States. The country's... Yes? Oh, Catherine's joined us. Hello, Catherine. Thank you for being part of the show this morning from New York. Listening on your Echo device. If you want to chat to me, then you're very welcome to. You can just open your browser and type in backchannel.tv, and then you can message me that way. But you're very welcome, Catherine. It's 12:28 on the East Coast. So yes, the country still bears the imprint of 20th century traumas, including the pre-war slide from democracy into Nazism and the East-West division that ended with the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. I do think it's fair to say there is a great concern in Europe and in my own country about the challenge to democracy in America, said Constance Stelzenmüller. I think about this all the time. It's actually like my least favorite and yet most repeated subject. The fact that it's taken a year since Trump committed treason against his own country to even start talking about the idea of convicting him, I just find completely insane and slightly disgraceful. It just doesn't make any sense to me that this would take so long. And in any other modern democracy, it's such a clear-cut case of what this guy did. Going on TV for a year before the election and saying the election is fraudulent, and if I don't win, it's because the election is a fraud. And, when asked if he would hand over power peacefully and, do a transition, he was like, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. That's the point at which you arrest the guy. You don't wait for after the coup to happen for Ashley Babbitt to get shot and murdered. Well, not murdered, to be executed by a stray bullet. Do you see what I mean? It's like, none of this could have happened. You had 5 Capitol police officers who 2 of them died of a heart attack and 3 committed suicide. I mean, I just really feel like the country needs to police itself better, doesn't it? Like, taking democracy for granted is what's on display here. And I think part of the problem, and I've said this before, is because the Democrats are called Democrats. And Democrat is born of the word democracy. And to uneducated Republicans, democracy is something that only Democrats care about. And if you lose it, well, fine, because then you own the libs. That's the tragedy of this debate, is that the definition of the word is associated with a political rival. If you hate the Democrats, you also then don't care for democracy. And you don't understand that democracy is at the very heart of your own beliefs, to be elected, to win. It's a mess. It's a gigantic mess. And I really worry that there's no re-education of this culturally. I really think that Biden should be on TV every day talking about this, every single day, pushing home every single argument, sitting down with Republicans and talking with them on television. There's no intelligent programming about this stuff. That you'll get the odd PBS documentary, but there's no talk back opportunity. There's no town hall type forum. There's nothing. And having analysts on CNN and stuff, I mean, it's just garbage. You need people, voters, to understand what losing your democracy means, the value of it, how essential it is. It's a very, very fragile thing. And yeah, in Europe, especially Germany, there are the remnants of the fall of democracy everywhere, where a Nazi dictator took over. But that never happened here. So people don't fear it, because there's no daily reminder of it. Did you read about the Canadian scholar who day before yesterday, said that by 2030, US democracy will be gone? It will be in the hands of an autocrat, and there will be no such thing as democracy. So I was thinking, great, we've basically got 8 years left. 8 years before democracy falls. Well, I actually don't agree with that. I think democracy has already fallen, and I think it's fallen courtesy of these Republicans that have been put in, and not just Republicans, because I have no problem with Republicans. I have problems with people that are supporting the big lie. And what Trump has done is he's installed all of these like-minded people into these legislature positions and as judges to basically protect the big lie that he won the election. He still thinks he won the election. He still thinks that was what happened and that the whole thing was a fraud. He's convinced of it. And so are his followers. Not all of them, but many of them. I was reading some statistics yesterday, and the numbers were still too high for my tastes. Theranos verdict won't stop foolish investors. There's a story here about Elizabeth Holmes. We're going to talk about her in a bit more detail later, but she's the CEO of the blood testing firm Theranos. She was found guilty on 4 counts of fraud. So we'll look at that story in detail in just a little minute. FDA expanding boosters for kids. Jabs are urged for those aged 12 to 15, 5 months after their last dose. And dangerous prey at homeless camp. This is a story about, it says, even in Los Angeles County, where hundreds of people are murdered each year, the 3 killings in a homeless encampment along the banks of Compton Creek stood out. It says, in death, the victims came to underscore the precarious, dangerous existence of homeless people in the county. And like many others scraping out lives on the streets, they were in the grips of drug abuse or mental illness. And they belong to a population that disproportionately falls victim to homicides and other violent crimes. And then also this actually is a bigger story than they're making. It's that Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump, and Donald Trump himself have now been subpoenaed by New York's Attorney General, seeking to question them in this fraud investigation into the Trump Organization. It's quite a big story, obviously. He has tried to counter-sue last night. And Letitia James, who's the Attorney General, she was like, She's like, you guys, you're gonna be treated the same as everybody else in this type of case. It's interesting, isn't it? Okay, let's jump now to the Mercury News. This is for Silicon Valley. Holmes found guilty of 4 counts of fraud. Theranos founder convicted of defrauding investors, acquitted on 4 other counts. Do you know, it's very interesting. I don't really know much about this case. It hasn't interested me. And I'll tell you why it hasn't interested me. And that is because the people that have been defrauded were very wealthy. And I don't really have much interest in people that can afford to be frauded. Do you see what I mean? My interest is in regular working people who can't get access to healthcare or abortion or are suffering the ills of the pandemic, the majority. But because Elizabeth Holmes was a wealthy person and the people that she defrauded, I presume, I don't know enough about the case, but as far as I'm aware, it was investors. And my feeling is that if you've got enough spare money to invest in anything, then you're okay. You'll be okay. So I haven't really read anything about it. And somebody said to me a few weeks ago, have you been looking at the Elizabeth Holmes case? And I said, I genuinely don't know who she is. I've never heard of her. Isn't it weird how it completely passed me by? Well, she dropped out of Stanford at the age of 19 in 2003 to start Theranos. I didn't even know she was particularly young. I've only ever seen her with a mask on. So, I just presume that she was in her 40s. But by the looks of it now, she's clearly younger. She's always in a business suit with a mask on when I've seen her. Anyway, found guilty on 4 counts of defrauding investors. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. FDA okays vaccine booster for ages 12 to 15. Pfizer booster eligibility shortened from 6 months to 5, as we've seen. Senate may vote to change filibuster rule. Well, this is an interesting story. This was Chuck Schumer yesterday, who's the majority leader. He said days before the anniversary of the January 6th attack on the Capitol, Chuck Schumer announced the Senate will vote soon on easing filibuster rules in an effort to advance stalled voting legislation that Democrats say is needed to protect America's democracy. In a letter on Monday to colleagues, Chuck Schumer said the Senate must evolve and will debate and consider the rule changes by January 17, which is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, as Democrats seek to overcome Republican opposition to their election law package. Here's the thing. If Republicans get control of both houses, which is likely, because of the such slim majorities, we'll chat about it later, but if they gain control in 2022 in the midterms, they will quash all of this legislation. So basically, the Democrats have only got a year to get this done, or less than a year. It'll be November, I presume. So they've got like 11 months now to get all of this stuff done. Otherwise, the Republicans are just going to put the kibosh on it, as we say in England. I don't even know what a kibosh is, but apparently it's a word we use all the time. I used a word here the other day on New Year's Eve. I went to a party, and I said, first thing I said was, I apologize for gate crashing. And they were like, what's gate crashing? They're like, do you mean crashing the party? And I was like, well, yeah, but I presume crashing the party comes from gate crashing, doesn't it? Because in England we would say gate crashing. We don't say crash a party, we say gate crash. And then I started to embarrass myself because, I always foolishly think that all American English is born of British English, and therefore gate crash must be the correct term and crash must be the incorrect term. And of course, the Americans didn't like that. I need to be a little bit more thoughtful, I try. I do my best, I don't mean anything bad by it, but I just, I kind of am obsessed with like the origins of language. And invariably a lot of it comes from, thousands of years ago. Stacey says, I think it's because Democrats just don't care. Don't care about what? Interested. Maybe you could share a little more. Tim's with us in New Hampshire. Stacey's in Texas. Skill Killer, the rapper, is in Oregon. Stacey says, Anthony, don't you ever feel embarrassed about what you're going to say or do because that's going to lead you down here? Okay. I understand. I take the point. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, after the LA Times, the Colorado is where we're heading now, to the Summit Daily. They lead with somewhere over the ice bow and a photograph of an ice bow. What is an ice bow? Pictured during sunset evening over Buffalo Mountain. Bless you, Carla. Bless you. Really? Gate crash is an Americanism? Maybe. And is there any explanation as to where what the gate represents? What is the gate? Is that the entrance to the party or to the whatever it is you're crashing? I'm very interested in language, and I feel that. Sorry, I'm just moving my ergonomic cushion. And I really feel like we have to. It's just important to know as much as we can about all of this stuff, Workers struggle to enforce mask rule. Also on the front of the Summit Daily this morning, it says frontline workers in restaurants, retail stores and public transit are finding themselves once again tasked with enforcing a mask mandate and taking the brunt of criticism from those who don't comply. Summit County Commissioner Elizabeth Lawrence said she'd heard from many who are concerned about seeing a lack of compliance at big box stores and was shocked herself to see more than half of people in one store without a mask. We're not trying to put frontline workers in a confrontational situation, she said. I think a lot of them have a lot of trauma from last year and from that sort of thing. That was not our intention. We're hoping to gain compliance through education. She thinks following the mandate is about being a good person, protecting your fellow people, and respecting frontline workers. And then on the front of the Summit Daily for this Tuesday morning, are wolves already here, is the headline. Some recent evidence suggests they might be nearby. As the logistics of Colorado's planned grey wolf reintroduction are still being ironed out, some are questioning whether the effort is necessarily now that wolf activity has been confirmed in the state. Colorado Parks and Wildlife spokesperson Travis Duncan said he can confirm 8 wolves in Colorado, 6 of which are the pups of 2 adults in the vicinity of Jackson County. Wow. Well, they're actually reintroducing wolves. Fascinating. So I've learned a lot here. Ice bow, which is, I guess, a rainbow born of the ice. Never heard of an ice bow. Heard of an asbow. Oh, an ice-bow is like an iceberg, only different, says Stacey. Well, this is like an ice-bow. This is like the sun reflecting on the ice and causing a kind of phantom. It's a bit like a aurealis, in the sky. It's very interesting. Never seen it before. So that's the Summit Daily done. I'm whizzing through these newspapers this morning. I mean, this is quite something. Never before have I operated at such a speed. Where are we at to now? The Arizona Republic I've done, the Enterprise Record, LA Times, Mercury News, Summit Daily. Here we go. The Day from Connecticut we're heading to now. And this is, they lead with looking ahead to the end game. COVID isn't over or isn't ever going away, but ideally it will be manageable. Do you know, this is very interesting. Maybe you've noticed this. There has been a shift in the media recently, and maybe in society, where people are beginning to accept that COVID is never going away. Before, like last year and the beginning of last year and even the year before that, we would talk about it as if, when this is over, when this is over, when this is over. And now I think people have realized this is not going to be over. This is it now. We are humans on a planet that is riddled with virus. It says pandemics do eventually end, but even if Omicron is complicating the question of when this one will, but it won't be like flipping a light switch. The world will have to learn to coexist with a virus that's not going away. The ultra-contagious Omicron variant is pushing cases to all-time highs and causing chaos as an exhausted world struggles again to stem the spread. But this time, we're not starting from scratch. Vaccines offer strong protection from serious illness, even if they don't always prevent a mild infection. Omicron doesn't appear to be as deadly as some earlier variants, and those who survive it will have some refreshed protection against other forms of the virus that are still circulating, and maybe the next mutant to emerge too. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? It's like we're only on Omicron. There's a lot more to come. PQRSTUVWXYZ, and then it'll start all over again. The newest variant is a warning about what will continue to happen unless we get really serious about the end game, said Dr. Albert Coe, an infectious disease specialist at the Yale School of Public Health. Certainly COVID will be with us forever, Coe added. We're never going to be able to eradicate or eliminate COVID, so we have to identify our goals. Also, surveillance cameras to be installed around New London. Council okays $366,000 of public health COVID funds for a police project. It says the City Police Department plans to install a series of more than 36 cameras throughout the city, creating a surveillance system covering roads and parks. I mean, it's so interesting to me because in England, where I'm from, we have cameras everywhere. That's how police do all of their crime catching. They just basically look at the tape. And they don't really do that here. There isn't security camera footage here. There's like gas stations have it to stop people from stealing fuel. But no, I mean, certainly here in California and most states that I've been to, there's no cameras anywhere. And that's one thing that when people ask me, like, what do you prefer about living in the United States? I refer to this feeling of freedom, not being watched all the time. Not that I was doing anything bad in the first place, but just the idea of being watched, constantly surveilled by the authorities. Do you know, in England, certainly in London we have over 20,000 cameras in London. And I feel like, the police have access to them, the transport services have access to them, the transport services own most of them. They're called TfL cameras, Transport for London cameras, and the police have access to those cameras. And, they can basically see everything, everywhere, all the time. They can monitor anybody's movements. And increasingly, the cameras now are joined up with cameras in stores. So every store has obviously a lot of CCTV, but those stores now are using technology that can actually spot people from spot them stealing without having a human operating the camera. So there's an algorithm now where the camera can tell if someone is taking something off a shelf and putting it in their bag or their pocket, or behaving suspiciously. There's an algorithm for that. And soon, that algorithm, I'm sure, will be rolled out to all cameras so that people behaving suspiciously just in society will be flagged. It sounds like Blade Runner, Carla, do you not feel like you're overly watched in London? Are you aware of how many cameras there are? Well, Atlanta does have a big problem, doesn't it? So I guess that cameras work for them. There's just no cameras here in California. It's just weird, Well, not that I've seen, certainly not where I live. I don't see any cameras. Interesting. So Atlanta has cameras, London, China, obviously. I do understand the importance of, using CCTV to catch criminals. And I would rather that the authorities use CCTV than just do what they do here in California, which is just shoot people first. Because they can't be bothered to chase them, so they just shoot them. And obviously, police body cameras, I've always said this, it's only in the last 10 years that police services have been using, or police forces, I should say. In England, we have to call them police service, but in America, they're still police forces. Police forces wear body cameras, and body camera footage is used as evidence now. And I used to say more than 10 years ago, when I talked about this subject on the radio, I used to say the solution to policing is body-worn cameras. I always thought this. Because there are so many discrepancies between who said what and who did what. And, if you just record everything on the body of a police officer, then that is going to, solve this crime. And I used to say, when the iPhone first came out, you had video recording facilities. I was like, they're already carrying cameras and hard drives. So my point is that, it's better to film people and record the scenario and then use that to then catch criminals 24 hours later than to go shoot someone and find out the person you shot is the wrong person, as is the case with that poor 14-year-old girl who was in a shop a few days ago, who just got shot from a stray bullet and died in her mother's arms. She was just trying on a dress. Also on the front of the day, it says towns begin limited test kit distribution. With numerous thank yous, some Happy New Year's sentiments, and more than a few personal greetings, Norwich firefighters, police and city leaders handed out some 1,200 COVID test kits and hundreds of boxes of N95 face masks on Monday in just 90 minutes. It says in Stonington, where town employees, police and firefighters began a 2-day distribution on Monday of 650 kits at 7 locations, people began lining up in their cars for hours, only to find out that all the kits were gone in 7 minutes. It's so interesting, isn't it, that suddenly these home test kits have become like the thing because the Omicron is so transmissible. And yet, they just can't make them fast enough. It's just beggars belief to me that this was not a consideration before. I actually got some tests. My mum brought them over from England a few weeks ago. And I opened up the box and I saw that they were made in China. So England is making its COVID tests in China and bringing them over. And then my mum brought that over in turn on an aeroplane to America. But I wonder if the US tests, the Binex tests, and there's a couple of companies that are making these tests. I wonder if they're made in America or made in China. Because if they're made in China, or components of them are made in China, which I think they probably are, then there's probably a shortage. supply issue, supply chain issue. And that in itself is an example of where things have gone so badly wrong for this pandemic. That the supply chain issue prevents you from getting the tests that you need to get out of the pandemic. Self-fulfilling prophecy. It's fascinating. Defense production expansion could help sub-building Joe Biden's move last week. Oh, Nathan. Hello, Nathan. Thank you for joining us. Nice to know that you're with us this morning. President Joe Biden's move last week to expand defense production capability could bring help to the region's submarine building industry, which has been hit hard by supply chain and manpower issues. The Navy and shipbuilding industries have reported as recently as last month that they're dealing with supply chain issues, shortfalls and delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as workforce, production supplies and space problems. Electric Boat President Kevin Graney has said in public statements multiple times during the pandemic that the company has low staffing levels due to the coronavirus, while hiring new employees also slows the construction process. Yeah, I mean, look, supply chain is going to become a thing that, grinds us to a halt eventually, isn't it? Unless they sort it out. I mean, they have sorted some of it out, but it's still difficult. And I know that the port here in California, Long Beach, where I think nearly half of all of the imports for the United States come through Long Beach. The ships come through the Panama Canal or the Suez Canal, traveling from China, bringing goods, and half of the goods for the United States comes through Southern California. And then finally, on the front of the day newspaper, the classic BlackBerry devices stop working today as era ends. It's such a great story, really, isn't it? I was never a BlackBerry person, never really was my thing. I was what did I have? My last phone before an iPhone was a Samsung. It was like a very thin, flat thing. It was tiny. And it was just a phone. It didn't really do anything. It was just a phone, but I liked how small it was, and it had a little 2-megapixel camera. You had a flip Motorola? Okay, well that's... Yeah, I was never a Motorola man. I was always a Sony Ericsson man, or in the days that I had it was just Ericsson. It wasn't even Sony Ericsson back then, it was just Ericsson. I had Ericsson phones. My first phone was an Oki 700E. And Oki was a Chinese company, and they made it. It was this big, Carla. The phone was this big. It was one of those huge handsets, and it had an antenna on it that was bigger than the phone. And I held it like this, and I used to keep it on a leather strap upside down and it went all the way down past my knee from my waist. And then I switched that out for I think I got an Ericsson, a Sony Ericsson, just an Ericsson phone that was about 1/10 of the size. But BlackBerry I was never the type of person that needed a BlackBerry. It was for people who composed long messages and business people. I was never that person. It never suited me. But we'll talk more about the BlackBerry in just a little while. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Just a reminder that we have a growing list of shows here on Backchannel. Haley and Allison Live, waking you up in the morning with lots of laughs. Their 1-star cinema review. Also Live Every Day with Liv Harrison, live from Texas, celebrating the little things in life with plenty of snacks. And what about the charming and funny Hal Rudnick, whose program, Your Pal Hal, directly follows this show at 11. Tomorrow, Hal and I are going to attempt to talk to each other through the magic of Backchannel. We're going to share the screen like two giant egos in a small bowl of sweets. So looking forward to that. It's going to be fun. Should we do the US news update in a couple of minutes? That would be good, wouldn't it? It's a little podcast that I do that you can download. It's called the US News Update, and it kind of enables you to just hear me talking about what's happening across the United States. It's like America. Anyway, here it is. It's Tuesday, January 4. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US news update. I'm Anthony Davis. A winter storm unleashed heavy snow and strong winds throughout much of the US Southeast and Mid-Atlantic on Monday, forcing federal offices and schools to close, grounding aeroplanes and knocking out power for thousands of people. Forecasts called for 4 to 8 inches of snow and winds of up to 40 miles per hour in the region's first blizzard of the season, according to National Weather Service. Severe weather warnings were issued from the Carolinas to New Jersey. A U.S. jury on Monday found Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes guilty of conspiring to defraud investors in the blood testing startup, convicting her on 4 of 11 counts. Holmes convicted on charges of defrauding 3 other investors, as well as conspiring to do so. She was acquitted on 3 counts of defrauding patients who paid for tests from Theranos and a related conspiracy charge. The jury could not reach a decision on 3 related to individual investors. The United States will issue new rules and $1 billion in funding this year to support independent meat processors and ranchers as part of a plan to address the lack of meaningful competition in the meat sector, President Joe Biden said on Monday. The initiative amid rising concerns that a handful of beef, pork and poultry companies have too much control over the American meat market, allowing them to dictate wholesale and retail pricing to profit at the expense of their suppliers and customers. Your daily US news update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel. Welcome back. That was the US news update. That was just 2 minutes. It went so fast, didn't it? Just in a flash. Yeah, fun, interesting. Lots to consider there. Let's continue with our newspaper review. Got lots happening. We're looking at the papers this morning. Stacey says I have a Galaxy smartphone because I have to be able to see what I'm doing and be able to text as well. And Stacey has to go now because her lunch hour is up. Thank you for joining us, Stacey. Appreciate you being with us for this period. All right, let's see what's next on the old newspaper front. I think we're going to go to Connecticut next for the Register Citizen. And this newspaper leads this morning with Torrington area towns distribute limited test kits. I mean, it really is just rubbish, isn't it, what's happening? This whole test kit disaster. It's a disaster. And I wish Biden would own it. You know, just like step up and own it. Hospitalizations from COVID on the rise. Data shows the last time it was this high was May 2020. Says the latest surge in COVID cases appear to show little sign of slowing through the New Year's holiday. As 301 more people were hospitalized over the weekend, driving the total number well above what was seen during last winter's wave of infections. According to the state's data, Connecticut COVID hospitalizations on Monday reached 1,452 patients, about 180 more than the peak seen in December 2020. So there we go. That's the Register Citizen. Housing survey needs public input, and how a Yale astrophysicist might help solve the universe's biggest mysteries. Well, this is the story that is most exciting on the front of this newspaper. It says a powerful space telescope that launched on Christmas Day could help a Yale scientist and her colleagues solve some of the biggest mysteries. The team has drawn on previous proposals to create a model of the universe where primordial black holes, or PBHs, formed a fraction of a second after the Big Bang and account for dark matter. They hope to verify the theory using observations from the James Webb Space Telescope, which is traveling millions of miles from Earth to seek light from the universe's first stars. And if they do, their work could shift conventional understandings of how galaxies formed and end a decades-long quest to uncover the identity of dark matter. Yeah. Yeah, Carla's saying it would be amazing, just to be asked what you do for a living. just to say, oh, well, I just unraveled the mysteries of the universe. Although I tend to say that when people ask me what I do for a living. I'm sure you do the same. It says the paper's authors include an astrophysicist at Yale University and her colleagues of the University of Miami and the European Space Agency's Director of Science. Their work could shift conventional understandings of how galaxies formed and end a decades-long quest to uncover the identity of dark matter. If their theories are correct, there will be many more stars early in the universe. We expect to see more galaxies. I mean, I do sometimes, and more recently, I've been watching lots of Neil deGrasse Tyson on television doing lectures on YouTube. I find those very fascinating. And I also like watching conversations with Richard Dawkins, who's a very, he's a anti-religion geneticist. And I do find this subject very interesting. I think about it a lot. But I have been thinking more recently about, the extent of our universe. I don't know why I've been thinking about it recently. I guess, the pandemic and mortality and, various things make you think about these things. And because I've never really given it much of a thought, because I'm not a religious person. I'm not that spiritual. I'm very much a humanist. I believe that what we have here is what we have. Like, that's what we have. And to worry too much about what's happening in other galaxies is pointless, because our solar system is all we need to survive. We need the moon and we need the sun. I don't know how much we need the other planets so much, but we certainly need those two for our planet to survive. And I just feel like it's kind of nice sometimes, isn't it, just to take your thoughts beyond our planet and to think about not extraterrestrial activity or, the life beyond Earth, but just to think about the expanse of Earth, of the universe, to think about the endlessness of space. And, there must be an equation, a mathematical equation, that computates what happens if you just keep going in one direction. Do you end up coming back on yourself? Do you reappear at the opposite end? Yeah, that's the interesting thing, like the space-time continuum. Carla's just saying that when they take a photograph in space of stars or of new planets or new galaxies, these photographs are thousands of years old. Like the imagery, what they see are already thousands of years old, because by nature of the fact that they're so far away. And it's completely mind-blowing. I wonder if there are people taking photos of us. So this James Webb telescope will be able to collect, data to help show that this model, that this Yale astrophysicist has worked on, is accurate. They say it's a very simple test. You just have to count the number of galaxies as a function of their faintness as seen by James Webb. Oh yeah, piece of cake. I'll do that in a heartbeat. They're not the first to posit the existence of PBHs or suggest that they answer the dark matter question. Research on the topic goes back to at least the 1970s, when physicists Stephen Hawking, Bernard Carr and George Chaplin published various papers on the subject. In 1974, Stephen Hawking and Carr contended the existence of PBHs was possible, according to Carr. Let's see page 5. I actually bought myself a book about this. Well, we talked about PBHs earlier. This is the primordial black hole. Yeah. You tried to catch me out. You thought it was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, didn't you? That's what you thought it was. It's a primordial black hole. Everybody knows that. Formed a fraction of a second after the Big Bang. and accounts for the dark matter. I bought A Brief History of Time as a Christmas present to myself, the Stephen Hawking book. I just thought, and I also bought a book called Sapiens, which you've probably heard of because it's been a bestseller for a few years. But it's basically about, it's a kind of alternative look at the creation. But I just feel like there are certain books one should have on their shelves, especially if you're a secularist. And I feel like A Brief History of Time is probably a good one. And I do contend with this whole, religion debate. When we talk about, the age of the earth and galaxies, and yet the Bible being 5,000 years old. How do we contend with those two constructs? Such a big subject. So many people debate it endlessly. Isn't it nice, the fact that in the human arena that we have these debates, like, are there extraterrestrial beings? Is the universe infinite? Is religion and, the Bible or the, Quran or the Torah or any of these books, are they based in truth? Was the Big Bang the beginning of Earth, or was it created in a week by God? Isn't it fun that we kind of have these conversations? That these are the conversations that are very much, the kind of headline chats that people might be having right now around the world as we speak. Like, these are the age-old conversations that we will keep going back to, and we will never have the answers to. And as I've got older, I've started to enjoy conversations that have no conclusion. I used to like to wrap things up and be like, and invariably win. I like to be the one that's will be like, well, there you go. But isn't it kind of fun to have conversations about things that A, you don't know enough about, B, you don't have enough evidence on, C, they're still working out, D, they're still exploring, and E, that kind of it's fun to not know. It's kind of fun to not know. And not knowing is actually a big part of knowing, isn't it? And that's why I feel like people are so against the pandemic, conceptually. They're not able to intellectualize it because they just have never experienced this before. And if it's something you've not experienced before, then you almost can't quite believe that it's a thing. And that's why we have conspiracies about alien abductions and various things like that, because people are so desperate to know that they end up creating a narrative that suits them. Adrian, good morning. Thank you for joining us in Louisiana. And Eileen as well in Illinois. Thank you for being on Backchannel this morning. It's 13 after 10 on the West Coast, 13 after 1 Eastern. I'm Anthony Davis. It's the Anthony Davis Show. And if you're watching on an Amazon Echo Show device, then you'll be able to see me. If you're listening on an Echo speaker, then you can also jump onto YouTube and see the stream there, or you can just be happy listening. I personally am happier if you just listen. I'm definitely better looking in sound. And all of Lamont's New Year's Eve tests came from CVS on the front of the Register Citizen this morning. It says, it finally came clear to Governor Ned Lamont late on Wednesday that Connecticut's shipment of 3 million rapid at-home COVID tests wasn't coming, despite his public promises. Faced with a dire crisis on the eve of an election year, he decided to ask CEOs for help. High on his list the next morning, Karen Lynch, former Aetna head in Hartford, who was promoted last winter to CEO of CVS, the Rhode Island-based parent company of CVS. Lamont talked with Lynch, then returned early from a vacation in Florida that was all work. Suddenly, he faced the cameras Thursday night to concede the state had been duped on the order of eye health tests. What, so they basically ordered a bunch of tests that were never coming? Where had they got these eye health tests from? They'd ordered 3 million of them. They never showed up. So what does he do? He goes to the CVS boss and he's like, listen, you got to get me some tests because it's an election year, and if I don't get these tests, no one's going to vote for me. And they're like, oh, okay then. Meanwhile, can you get a test in CVS? No. Sold out. Sold out across the country. Not a single CVS store has a test. Beggars belief. Only a few weeks ago, I was buying them in there all the time. You know, they were getting them in like once a week. There'd be a stack of them and you'd buy them, they'd go, and then you'd go back in. And I'd always say, when are they coming in? And I'd go and get them. And then I made the rather clever move of ordering 5 boxes of 2 tests on the Walmart website. And they were delivered 2 days later. Now, of course, those are sold out as well, probably because they allow people like me to buy 5 boxes. Whereas in the store, you know, the max you could buy was 2 packs. Whereas in Walmart, on the internet, they were allowing you to buy as many as you wanted. So people were probably buying dozens of boxes. I bought 5 boxes. And that was nearly $100. Yeah, no, I'm not stockpiling them for myself. They're for my family. You know, I've been giving them out. I'm like a local service provider. We had somebody from the school messaging everyone the other day saying, you know, is it possible that anyone's got a spare test? I need a spare test, you know. Should we talk about this Elizabeth Holmes story? It's very interesting. Elizabeth Holmes has been convicted of defrauding investors after a months-long landmark trial in California. Oh, have I not done the Washington newspapers? Okay, I'm sorry. Let's look at this one. Let's do the Washington Post very quickly. Money is driving far-right feuding, they say. The far-right firebrands and conspiracy theorists of the pro-Trump internet have a new enemy, each other. Yes, QAnon devotees are livid at their former hero Michael Flynn for accurately calling their jumbled credo total nonsense. Trump superfans have voiced a sense of betrayal because the former president got booed for taking the booster shot and has become a vaccine salesman. And attorney Lynn Wood seems mad at pretty much everyone, including former allies on the scattered elite strike force team investigating non-existent mass voter fraud. So after... it is great that they're kind of eating themselves, but I still am terrified of this movement. You know, I'm genuinely terrified of this movement. They care nothing for the country as a whole. They just care about, you know, returning this dictator to power at whatever cost. After months of failing to disprove the reality of Trump's 2020 presidential election loss, some of the internet's most popular right-wing provocateurs are grappling with the pressures of restless audiences, saturated markets, ongoing investigations, and millions of dollars in legal bills. The result is a chaotic melodrama, playing out via secretly recorded phone calls, personal attacks on podcasts, and a seemingly endless stream of posts on Twitter, Gab, and Telegram, calling their rivals Satanists, Communists, Pedophiles, or Patriots, P-A-Y, money-grabbing grifters exploiting the cause. Also on the front of the Washington Post this morning, in Congress, January 6 left legacy of fear and anger. It says a year later, the House of Representatives can still look like a crime scene on some days. 5 metal detectors ring the outer doors to prevent weapons from getting into the chamber floor, including one that stands just a few feet from where a Capitol police officer shot and killed a January 6 rioter trying to crawl through a door just off the House floor. But the detectors aren't there to deter armed insurrectionists. Instead, those detectors are there to prevent lawmakers or their staff from trying to commit violence against each other. Yeah, trust in one another, whether to clinch a critical legislative deal or to protect each other from violence, seems to be at an all-time low 1 year after a pro-Trump mob attacked the Capitol with both Democrats and Republicans in its crosshairs. I mean, I've said this for a while now. I am genuinely concerned that someone is going to assassinate one of the squad, you know? Ilhan Omar or Rashid Tlaib. They'll probably get shot by somebody in Congress. You know, this is where it's going to become. This is what's going to happen. And I hate to be the one to predict this, and I'm not trying to tempt fate, but there is so much hatred and division between these two groups, and so these these non-white women, these few Muslim members of Congress, are in the crosshairs of these far-right Congress people. Invariably women. I mean, that's the crazy thing. Women against women. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert. AOC, she is so eloquent. She is so outspoken. She is so desperate to do the right thing for her people. And yet she is hated, absolutely despised by the right. And not just voters, but hated by people who are working with her, working in the congressional chamber. It's insane. Booster response reveals ongoing racial disparity. It says as black communities' vacation rates lag, experts point to access, eligibility, and mistrust of system. Yeah. I mean, I've heard from people, and people of color specifically, who say they've heard that people have died from the vaccine. Now, I'm not aware of anybody who's died from the vaccine. They might have died from complications of other things, and the timing might have been around the vaccine time, but there has been no evidence of people dying because of the vaccine. The vaccine is not that strong. It doesn't have those properties. There's nothing about the vaccine that can kill you. It can make you unwell. You have side effects, but it doesn't kill people. And yet there's been quite a lot of propaganda about it killing people. And that's why people are not taking it, especially in the black community. The Washington Times leads with a legal fight for gun rights under Second Amendment. Debate on the people who bear arms reaches the High Court. Interesting. This is about Felix Alvo took to the streets of Denver in the wake of George Floyd's death in 2020. He cruised downtown jeering at police. He became drunk and challenged officers to fight, telling an undercover police officer, "This ain't no peaceful protest." He waved a pistol at bystanders and at one point, according to investigators, fired 8 shots into the air at a police helicopter circling overhead. His big mistake, however, was holding that gun while being an illegal immigrant. It says out of all of the mayhem in which authorities said Alva was involved, he was convicted of a single crime, being in the country illegally whilst in possession of a firearm. And even as the Biden administration moves towards leniency towards illegal immigrants on so many fronts, there is a line the government hasn't crossed. Possessing a firearm is still a serious offense. But weirdly, being a congresswoman and posing with your entire family holding semi-automatic weapons for a Christmas card is not an offense. There it is. Schumer starts clock on filibuster future. Senate rule rests on GOP support of voting bill. We've discussed that a little bit earlier. Christian families putting more faith in Hollywood. Crowd funds bring alternatives home. This is the message from filmmakers specializing in Christian and conservative themes and stories. They say 2022 will be the year of Hollywood alternatives for a streaming audience that they estimate at 52 million. It's so interesting. Angel Studios distributes crowd-funded independent productions such as the Life of Christ series, The Chosen, and the animated free-market children's fantasy Tuttle Twins. And look, isn't it funny, we've covered all of these newspapers and there's been no mention of Vladimir Putin on any of them, apart from this one here on the front of the Washington Times. Putin pressure pushes nations towards NATO. This is the only reference to the fact that the US could be at war in a matter of days. Russian President Vladimir Putin's tough talk and threatening military buildup on Ukraine's border could backfire and result in one thing that he says he doesn't want: an expansion of NATO to more countries on Russia's doorstep. And while Mr. Putin is seeking guarantees from the West that Ukraine and others not be allowed to join the Western military alliance, some countries in the region that long shunned NATO membership in favor of a policy of neutrality are reconsidering purely as a response to Russia's aggressive posturing. So there it is. Interesting. The Washington Times. I didn't really know there was a Washington Times, but there it is. Okay, let's go to this story about Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos, which to me sounds like a baddie in a Marvel movie. Elizabeth Holmes has been found guilty of defrauding investors in her former blood testing startup company Theranos. It also sounds like a flask that might keep hot things hot and cold things cold. Concluding that a trial that has gripped both Silicon Valley and the international media outlets, which initially helped propel her to stardom. Theranos was at one point valued at approximately $9 billion. It's now a byword for corporate misconduct, having wowed the tech world before collapsing in a storm over the efficacy of the technology supposedly at its core. And as the founder and former chief executive officer of the disgraced company, Holmes was accused of lying to patients about testing and to investors about projected revenues, and had faced 11 separate fraud charges. Yes, after a federal trial in San Jose, California, lasting nearly 4 months and involving some 30 witnesses, jurors on Monday found her guilty on 4 counts, including conspiracy against Theranos investors and wire fraud involving Theranos investors. But she was acquitted on all 4 counts of fraud and conspiracy against patients who had used Theranos' blood tests. And despite 50 hours of deliberations spanning 7 days, jurors were unable to reach a unanimous verdict on 3 other counts. So, as the final chapter in Holmes' spectacular rise and fall comes to a close, how did she get into this position? And how did the legal proceedings, described by some as Silicon Valley's trial of the century, unfold? It says, having dropped out of Stanford School of Engineering in 2003, a 19-year-old Holmes used her tuition money as seed funding for a consumer healthcare technology company based on the idea of performing blood tests using only a small amount of blood, such as a finger prick, rather than drawing blood for testing into vials with needles. She cited her own fear of needles as her inspiration for the technology. Taking her idea to her medicine professor at Stanford, she was told that it would not work. Several other experts repeated this warning, but she convinced her dean at the School of Engineering to back the concept, and he became the first board member of Theranos, which is a combination of the words therapy and diagnosis. Theranos. Is it Theranos? Maybe it's Theranos. Theranos sounds a little bit more aggressive though, doesn't it? Theranos sounds like the baddie in the Marvel movie. So Holmes began raising money for the firm with tech investors and adopted Steve Jobs' look, frequently appearing in black turtleneck sweaters and speaking in a baritone voice. By the end of 2010, she'd raised $92 million in capital and was becoming well known across Silicon Valley. By 2014, she was on the covers of Fortune and Forbes, and the New York Times Style magazine, and when Theranos was valued at $9 billion in 2014, Holmes was placed at number 100 on the Forbes 400 list of the wealthiest people in the US and named as the youngest self-made billionaire. And at this point, she'd raised more than $400 million in venture capital, had a name on 18 US patents and 66 foreign patents, and established business relationships with the Cleveland Clinic, Capital Blue Cross, and AmeriHealth Caritas to use the company's technology for blood testing. Amongst her investors were Rupert Murdoch, Carlos Slim, Larry Ellison, Henry Kissinger, and George Shultz. And in 2015, then Vice President Joe Biden visited one of the company's facilities in Newark, California, and declared it the laboratory of the future. It employed 800 people. I mean, I find this kind of fascinating now that I'm reading the story. She was 19 years old when she used her tuition money to seed funding for this technology, right? Yeah. People said it won't work. You can't do a blood test from a finger prick. I mean, I presume that's because there's just not enough blood. Is that the reason? Like, there's just not enough blood. I mean, how do people not flag this? Like, if there are enough scientists in the world who are aware of this, because to me this is like a California story. You know, things in California just grow so quickly. There's so much money in the state of California. You know, it's her confidence and her conviction in her product. But when you're talking about a medical device, surely there has to be some kind of, testing done by the CDC or HHS or one of these organizations that can license this. So did it never get licensed? Did it never come out? It was never used. Never got that far. In March 2018, the US Securities and Exchange Commission charged Holmes and Ramesh Balwani, former president of Theranos and chief operating officer, with fraud for taking more than $700 million from investors while advertising a false product. Here we go. Problems mounted. Oh, hang on. Here we go. The fortunes of the company began to turn in October when John Carreyrou of the Wall Street Journal wrote an article claiming that Theranos had been forced to use conventional blood testing methods in its research because its own Edison technology was providing erratic and inconsistent results. He was tipped off by a medical expert who was suspicious of the technology. Pursuing the story further, he discovered that the company's apparent innovative tech was nowhere near ready for use and had been rushed into development to meet the expectations of its influential investors. The equipment Joe Biden had been shown was allegedly not actually operational. While Holmes denied all claims and strenuously defended herself and her company in media appearances, however, problems with lab facilities, staffing, and procedures saw her banned from owning, operating, or directing a blood testing service for 2 years. Pharmacy chain Walgreens ended a relationship with the company at this point. Problems continued when Mr. Carreyrou published an interview with whistleblower Tyler Schultz, grandson of board member George Schultz, who alleged the company cast aside inconvenient Edison test results, thereby falsifying the accuracy of the process. And other revelations came to light, including the storage of samples at incorrect temperatures and patients being placed in jeopardy because of false readings of the flawed tests. Then in 2016, a federal investigation into the allegations about testing happened, and Forbes announced that Holmes' fortune, which was based on her 50% share in the company, had dropped to zero. There it is. She'd have hidden some money, yeah. So, on 15th of June, following an investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Northern District of California in San Francisco, a federal grand jury indicted Holmes and Mr. Balwani on 9 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Prosecutors alleged the pair engaged in 2 criminal schemes, one to defraud investors and the other to defraud doctors and patients. Both pleaded not guilty. Mr. Balwani and Mrs. Holmes have a long relationship. They met when she was still a teenager and at school. He's 19 years older than her, and they were romantically involved from 2003 until the collapse of the company, though the relationship was kept a secret. And they have differing accounts of his exit from Theranos, with Miss Holmes saying that she fired him and he claiming he left of his own accord. And he faces trial next month. I mean, this is very, very interesting. They're saying that central to her trial was the question of whether Holmes intentionally misled investors, doctors, and patients as she collected impressive investments. She was ultimately found guilty of wire fraud in connection with 3 wire transfers totaling more than $143 million. I mean, this to me is it's fascinating. This is fascinating to me. Yeah, HBO are going to make a documentary called The Inventor, Out for Blood in Silicon Valley. What a great title. And they're doing a mini-series on Hulu called The Dropout. I mean, I'd like to think, because I believe that all people fundamentally are good, that she started this because she genuinely was afraid of needles, and she genuinely wanted to come up with a technology that enabled blood to be tested from a pinprick. From a finger pinprick. So you can totally see the logic behind this. There's definitely an argument to be had for this product, and I guess that's why she was able to raise $9 billion. Because fundamentally, this is actually a great idea. And good ideas are very much are very few and far between on this planet. Most stuff has been invented now. Steve Jobs did most of it. I don't really know how to feel about her. I need to go now and watch some footage of her being interviewed and see how to experience the confidence of her conviction. To really see whether or not, to me, because I have quite good feelers for people. I'd quite like to know, just from watching her, whether she looks like someone who's like a secret criminal, or is somebody who just thinks they're just doing their best and it just wasn't good enough. Yeah, I don't know about showing no emotion in court. I think that it's very, I've been to court just once. I got off. It was a dangerous driving charge, and the judge said I was the most honest witness he'd ever had in his courtroom, which was great. So I do know what it's like to have the nerves of being in a courtroom and understand that, showing emotion on the outside, some people just like close up. I get that. So I don't think that that's really the issue. For me, this is more about whether or not, she would want to apologize to the investors, whether she genuinely felt that she was doing good and was onto something, and maybe she was of the opinion. Because, this is the thing about criminality, and we've seen this with the Trump crime families, that they can convince themselves that they're the goodies. They convince themselves that they are the ones who are saving the world, that are doing good. They don't think of themselves as arch criminals. They think of themselves as being on the right side of the law. Well, actually, they don't really care for the law, but on the right side of history. And so this is why I find it so interesting with people like Elizabeth Holmes. Because you could argue that she was so into this, she believed vehemently that this product was a genuine lifesaver, that she kind of ignored the fact that it was taking too long to develop. And maybe she thought that in time they would come up with the technology, and that maybe the investments were necessary to get to that point. She could have convinced herself of that. This is what I don't really know yet. I mean, obviously, haven't read the case, so I don't really know anything about anything. But I do recognize that, we're dealing with somebody here who is just very, was down the rabbit hole, had really kind of committed to this product from a very early age and was not going to give up on it anytime soon. I mean, yeah, some people are like on the spectrum and they can get into this. I mean, prosecutors said that she knowingly lied about the technology. She said she could detect diseases with just a few drops of blood. And and she's denied the charges. Incidentally, there's a maximum prison sentence of 20 years for each of these charges. I think she was done on 4 charges. They haven't set a date for sentencing yet. I'm going to watch the HBO documentary called The Inventor, Out for Blood in Silicon Valley. I think it's already been out, so I'm going to take a look at that. Anyway, it's very interesting to me. This is Backchannel. Adrian's with us. Aylin's with us. A whole bunch of people with us. Thank you very much for spending your morning with Backchannel this morning. Nathan is here, and Skill Killer, the rapper, is in Oregon. Michael, thank you for being part of the show. You got me for another 15 minutes before your pal Hal is here. Let's take a little look at the story about the filibuster, because this is something that has really, it's Chuck Schumer announced yesterday that they're going to finally, talk about debating whether or not the filibuster needs to be changed in order to get voting rights passage, or even the opportunity for debate in the House of Representatives, which is so offensive to me. It's like voting rights should have been the first thing that they did ahead of any other policies. They should have just done that, but apparently they've chosen this moment to take it on. Anyway. It's Charles Schumer, yeah. It's cute that they call him Chuck. He's like a New York Jew. He's got he's got Chuck E. Cheese written all over him. I like Chuck Schumer. I also like his hair transplant. I find it fascinating. That kind of straight line across the top. It's just too straight. And also he didn't go all the way, so he's bald from the back. If you look at him from behind, he's completely bald. You look at him from the front, and it looks like he's got hair. And he basically had his hair transplant done so it satisfies him when he looks in the mirror. A lot of people do that. Anyway, it says, when Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell handed over power to the new Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, there were attempts to ensure the archaic tactic stays in use. Filibustering is to deliberately waste time during a debate by making overlong speeches or raising unnecessary procedural points. It means a bill or a motion may be talked out and stopped from making progress within the time allowed. You may have seen this the other day, wasn't it? Who was it that did this? Oh, it was Kevin McCarthy, wasn't it? Didn't he do an 8-hour speech the other day? He did. 8 hours. It was just relentless, and it was garbage. I mean, the stuff he was saying was just utter conspiracy crap, and the guy is the leader of the Republican Party in the House of Representatives. So the practice goes back as far as the Roman Senate, but it has been used, and some say abused, in democracies ever since. It's often viewed as archaic and regressive because an older version of the filibuster was used by segregationists to block civil rights legislation. The term is derived from a Spanish word, filibustero, meaning pirate, and it was first used in a political context by an American congressman in 1853. And around the world, they have serious rules attached to them. US senators are allowed, to read out recipes or even the phone book to run the clock down. But in Britain, MPs have to stay on point, and current rules prevent them from lasting more than 4 hours. A British Member of Parliament, Philip Davis, has developed a reputation for filibustering bills in Parliament. He spoke for 78 minutes during one debate in the House of Commons in a bid to talk out the bill, which proposed ratifying the Istanbul Convention on Preventing Domestic Violence. During his marathon speech, the Conservative branded the bill as sexist against men. He said, "Of course I oppose violence against women, but I also oppose violence against men and boys, and having a strategy for one and not the other is just not acceptable to me." Despite his efforts, the bill passed by 135 votes to 2 on the 16th of December 2016. So though there are major critics of the filibuster tactic in the Senate, there is no confirmation that it will be removed. The Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is prolonging handing over the transfer of control to the Senate Majority Leader, as he says he wants Democrats to promise to stick to the 60-vote threshold to pass nearly every piece of legislation, essentially promising the filibuster will still be in use. I think this article is from a year ago, by the looks of it. It was November. Interesting. One vocal critic of the tactics, Senator Jeff Merkley, a Democrat, says removing it would have an impact on helping Americans. He said people live through the horror story of watching Mitch McConnell deliberately obstruct efforts to help Americans, and if we replay that movie and not be prepared for it, and let it play out again in that fashion, it's a big mistake. You see, I just don't get it. Oh, here we go. 8.5 hours. In November 2021, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy delayed the Democrats' social spending and climate package by making an 8.5-hour filibuster-style speech. He utilized the Magic Minute tool available to the Speaker, Majority Leader and Minority Leader, where these members are permitted to speak for an unlimited amount of time during a floor debate. Oh, hi, Pierce. Welcome back. And Peggy, Adrian, and Eileen. Pierce is in Texas. Hi, Pierce. At 4:46 a.m., McCarthy broke the previous record for the longest House floor speech. On November the 19th, the House passed Biden's $2 trillion Build Back Better package, despite McCarthy's attempted delay in proceedings. I mean, this is the thing that I just don't quite understand, and I wish I knew more about US politics. And I don't, because I have only been here for 5 years, and my analysis of it before I moved here was very different. Because, I was relying on secondhand information. But I really feel like there is this obsession with traditions here, And I think that Biden, being an old school senator, is probably the kind of person that would want to keep the filibuster. But how do you get voting rights done? How do you get arguably the most important piece of legislation ever? Because, politics is built on votes, on the democratic system of a vote, a free vote. You vote for these people. So what we're effectively saying is, without Voting Rights Act, this whole system becomes undone, void, You won't be able to democratically elect members of Congress anymore because the system is rigged. And please understand that this is a different form of rigging to the one that Donald Trump claimed was fraud. He was talking about, dead people voting and people having ballots sent out to them and fraudulent counts and stuff and voting machines being rigged. And none of that was true. It's been investigated multiple times. None of that was true. But what is true this time when it comes to election fraud is the fact that state legislatures are now being packed with people who are trying to rig a vote so that Trump is the winner, or whichever Republican candidate is the winner every time. Like, that's what he is going for. That's what they are going for. And they're not even doing it in secret. It's all, it's all on public record. And the reason they're doing it is they're taking advantage of these loopholes that enable them to be able to prevent any future elections from going to the Democrats. Because these state legislatures will claim that Republicans won the state. Whether it's true or not, they don't care. It's very interesting, isn't it? So my feeling is that the filibuster needs to be removed. They need to pass voting rights and anything else that needs to get done, like the climate and the climate bill, the climate and social care bill, and then they can put the filibuster back if they want to. But you can't fundamentally lose democracy in America over this. It's not worth it. Because what comes instead is far worse. Yeah, Manchin. Should we talk briefly about the BlackBerry? Because this was something that we wanted to mention earlier. It's kind of a cute little story, isn't it? This is the BlackBerry is ending support for its classic smartphones 22 years after the smartphone device first hit the market. A little over a decade ago, everybody wanted to own a BlackBerry because of its little QWERTY keyboard and palm-fitting size. The innovative phone was considered the best mobile device for enterprise or business users. And at its peak around 2009, BlackBerry owned 20% of the global smartphone market. In fact, there were more than 50 million smartphones sold in the US alone. The phone was popular among white-collar professionals. Some of the prominent users of the device included the former President Barack Obama. And there's no denying that BlackBerry was the ultimate communication device a decade ago. I personally have never used one. Never used one. I've obviously held one, but I've never used one. To me, it was never attracted to me, you know? I had an iPod Touch before I got an iPhone, because the iPod Touch kind of came out first, and that was like a very exciting device to have. But you needed a Wi-Fi connection to do anything. And then eventually I got an iPhone 3, the iPhone 3G. That was like my first one. I have since purchased the original iPhone 2G, which I have in perfect condition in a box. It's like my prized possession. The original iPhone. Of course I want to have that. I have it in a box. Anyway, iOS, of course, and Android, they basically left the RIM operating system lagging. Newer BlackBerry models were able to adopt the Android operating system, but could not live up to the sales expectations, plus demand the brand had become accustomed to and enjoyed a decade ago. And then Windows Mobile, I think BlackBerry tried that for a while, and that was a disaster. So, according to a statement by BlackBerry, the legacy services for BlackBerry 7.1 OS and earlier BlackBerry 10 software will no longer be available after the 4th of January. As of this date, devices running these legacy services and software through either carrier or Wi-Fi connections will no longer reliably function, including for data, phone calls, SMS, and 911 functionality. I met someone about 3 months ago, and she had a BlackBerry. And she's like, I can't not use it. I love it. And I was like, why? She was like, I don't know. I just love it. I think it's feeling the buttons, isn't it? That's really what it is. It's that tactile impression that is the thing that made BlackBerry kind of fun. But because it was so badly made and plasticky and it would bend, you would hear the kind of click, 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 clickety, click, click, click. And I just wasn't into that. I like the silence of iOS. That's just me. That's just who I am, you know. So, yeah, it's time to throw your BlackBerry in the trash, unfortunately, or recycle it if you can. And then just in the last couple of minutes, let's do a final mention for Ralph Bunche, because he was appointed the first African-American official in the U.S. State Department, and he was born on the 7th of August 1904 in Detroit, and he received the 1950 Nobel Peace Prize for his late 1940s mediation in Palestine, making him the first African-American and person of color to be so honored in the history of the prize. He was involved in the formation and administration of the United Nations and was awarded the Medal of Freedom by President John F. Kennedy. So, it's kind of interesting, isn't it, that, there are these kind of great Americans, in the case of Ralph Bunche, first African-American official in the U.S. State Department. And, I mean, it's not really that long ago. That's the tragedy of this, He was a handsome fellow as well. I'm looking at a photo of him. He died in 1971. He was an academic, a UN diplomat known for his peacekeeping efforts in the Middle East and Africa and the Mediterranean. And he also served an important role at the United Nations. He would advise as an advisor of the U.S. delegation at the 1945 San Francisco Conference. He joined the UN Secretariat in 1946 as director of the Trustee Division, giving him responsibility for overseeing the administration of the UN Trust territories as they progress towards self-government and independence. This is all very important stuff. Anyway, so we'll spare a thought for him today, Ralph Bunche, who died in 1971 and won himself a Nobel Peace Prize. You see, great Americans. Listen, thank you for joining me this morning and this afternoon. It's been a pleasure spending the morning with you, and I'll come back tomorrow morning and we'll do it all over again at the same time from 9 a.m. Pacific. And if you are spending the rest of the day with Backchannel, well, you've come to the right place. There are hosts throughout the day that will keep you entertained here on Backchannel. You can, of course, use the chat facility at backchannel.tv to talk at any time to the hosts. You can also talk to your Echo device by waking it up, saying say, and then your message. And you can also stream the shows on YouTube as well. There's a back catalogue to look at there as well. Have a really good Tuesday.